You're gambling with World War III.
Это нарушает нашу безопасность, расширение НАТО.
As a military strategic planner, a former planner, you don't want politicians telegraphing what your next moves are going to be.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too.
A peacekeeping force does not exist with a ceasefire.
Welcome to this week's Security Brief with me, Regina Vaidyanathan, and Mikey K. Well, it's been 2 weeks since President Trump announced on Truth Social that there was to be a ceasefire between Israel and Iran after that 12-day conflict. Well, days earlier, American bombers targeted 3 Iranian nuclear sites in what many feared would be an escalation. But as that ceasefire continues to hold, there are questions about what comes next, what's the current state of Iran's nuclear capabilities, and what will those reported talks between Iran and the US actually achieve. Well, with me to discuss all of this, as ever, is our resident analyst, former senior officer and assault helicopter pilot in the British military, Mikey K. And as always, he will deliver his brief as he would to his generals. Mikey, we're going to be taking a look later at Iran's nuclear programme.
We will.
But I wanted to start by asking you about some of the other significant developments when it comes to what's been going on with Iran and the military there.
Yeah, Regina, something that's really jumped out at me over the last week or two is what we call the conventional warfare aspect. So conventional means ordinary stuff like fighters, ships, tanks. And the most notable rumblings for me have been concerning the Chinese-made J-10C fighter jet. And the Iranians are basically eyeing this up. Let's take a look at what the J-10C looks like. This is the Chinese-made J-10C. It's China's Chengdu J-10C fighter jet, also known as the Vigorous Dragon. So they've given it quite an interesting name. It's come to prominence following its use by Pakistan in the recent Kashmir conflict with India. And it's a proven ability now to go toe-to-toe with Western-made, highly capable fourth-generation fighters. So the J-10C is what's called multi-role. So it can carry air-to-ground missiles, it can carry air-to-air missiles, or it can carry a combination of both.
So just to be clear, Iran is eyeing these up, thinking of buying a load.
It is, and the specifics are interesting here. So let's take a closer look. Slide, please, of the J-10C. This is obviously a view from front on. Of note, you've got a fixed refueling probe to the top left of the picture. You've got canards, which are the smaller wings towards the front of the airplane. That makes the aircraft highly maneuverable. But what's really interesting for me is what's inside that nose cone. So this jet has what's called, and I'm going to try and get my lips around this, active electronically scanned radar. It's called an ESA radar. What that basically means is it's a radar that can detect and track air-to-ground targets, but at the same time, it can conduct electronic warfare missions. Now, this is interesting because what it's doing is it's combining the capabilities of what usually require multiple platforms to do that into just one aircraft. So just to put that into perspective, let's go slide. This is a UK Typhoon. This is scheduled to have an upgrade on the ESA radar, but it doesn't quite have it currently. Whereas if we go and look at next slide, please, these two aircraft on the right, we have the F-22 US made Raptor. That's a 5th generation aircraft. That's got an ESA radar. And then on the left there, you've got the French Rafale. That's referred to as a 4.5 generation aircraft because it doesn't quite have the 5th generation bits on it. So, those two have it. The Typhoon is yet to receive it. But Iran are now looking at a capability which is equivalent effectively to the radar that those two aircraft that you can see on the screen. So that's really stood out for me. Now, why are Iran looking at this? Well, part of Iran's fixed-wing air defense capability was historically US-made and procured during the reign of the Shah. So pre-1979 Islamic State revolution. Let's take a look at the Iranian F-14. This is the Tomcat. Now, obviously, spares and maintenance are going to become an issue here. Post-1979, the US are not going to have any form of packages with Iran that give them that. So the limitations meant that the shelf life of operating these jets were coming to an end anyway. But if you add to that the degradation of these US-made jets from recent IDF strikes, it's no surprise, really, that Iran are looking for a new capability.
And can I just ask you, who has these AESA-nosed jets then? Which other countries?
Well, so as you saw from the slide, I don't know if we can go back slide on that, but the French Rafale, which we saw on the left of the screen, that slide, I don't know if we can bring that up, and also the F-22 Raptor you can see on the right there, French-made Rafale on the left. They do have these radars. The UK Typhoon is scheduled to have it, but is yet to receive it just yet. What's in the mix as well as the J-10C for the Iranians is also the Su-35. If we can go to a slide, I think we've got a picture of that. This is Russian-made Su-35 Sukhoi. I'm estimating that's going to be in the mix because Iran haven't confirmed or denied that it's purchasing around 40 of the J-10Cs. But Iran has already ordered 24 of these jets from Russia a couple of years ago, but they're yet to be operational. So if Iran sees that there's some form of delay in the production of these aircraft, then they might just flick to China for the J-10Cs.
OK, so that's the military changes going on. But of course, in the conversation since those strikes, there's also been a conversation around the Iranian government.
Yeah, I think, we've seen a lot of rhetoric coming out of the US, not necessarily from the Trump admin, but, from senators, from US media about regime change. And, this is something I'm really quite passionate about. I spent 3 tours in Iraq and was personally involved in the assessments of the Afghan National Army in Afghanistan. And, what I learned being in Iraq from 2003 to 2005 and 2006 is any regime attempts that create a security vacuum have been historically catastrophic, and we've seen that in Iraq. The US's Paul Bremner, he was put in as the head of the Transitional Authority just after the invasion of Iraq in 2003. He effectively fired all of Saddam's army, and what that did was it created a security vacuum that wasn't replaced. So a security vacuum being army and police, for example, that wasn't replaced. That allowed Al-Qaeda in Iraq to thrive, who then morphed into Islamic State in Iraq, that then morphed into Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, and then ultimately became the Islamic State. And then from further experience of assessments on the Afghan National Army, even with all of the resources, mentoring and equipment capability that was given to the Afghan National Army, mostly by the Americans, there is no guarantee that success is going to come from that. And as we saw in Afghanistan with the Taliban now in power, it speaks for itself.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's not just about dropping bombs in certain places. But let's talk about some of the other targets. We're going to get onto the nuclear sites in a minute. But we understand that the Israelis also targeted Evin prison, where the Iranian government had been holding political prisoners. We long have reported on accusations that the Iranian government is trying to stifle any sort of dissent. A lot of women have been taken to the streets over the years as well. Just tell our viewers why Evin prison is so significant.
For me, this was a massively counterproductive move that came, I think, on around day 11 of the 12-day conflict. And the reason why I think it's counterproductive is, if we can go slide, we can see some battle damage from this video. This is video footage of the damage created by the IDF airstrikes. 71 prisoners were reportedly killed in the strikes. But these people inside this building were anti-regime. They'd been put there because they were dissidents and they were anti-regime. And it just makes no sense that, if there's an idea of creating regime change from within, this would totally oppose that. And I think, the estimates from talking to people who are dissident inside Iran, this really didn't help their cause.
It's all really complex, isn't it? And of course, one of the things that was talked about was the US's involvement, which was just over 2 weeks ago on a Saturday night, where those B-2 bombers targeted 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Before we go into the fallout from that, just remind us of those 3 sites.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's been a couple of weeks now, but if we can go slide, we can just take a look at a quick map. Towards the top of that slide, you've got Tehran, the capital, and then the 3 main sites are almost directly south. So you've got Fordo just below Tehran. This was the main target of the US. It's an enrichment facility that had over 2,000 centrifuges deep underground. It had surface-to-air missile systems around it, so the Iranians obviously wanted to protect it. Most of the bunker busters, the GBU-57, which I'll talk about in a second, were placed on Fordo. Natanz was also a target of the B-2s, but not to the extent of Fordo. And then you've got Isfahan just below that. which is the nuclear research center, and that was hit by Tomahawk land attack missiles. But if we can go slide, we can take a closer look on the Fordo facility. This is what they call battle damage assessments, BDAs. The main target of the B-2s and the GBU-57s, that massive ordnance penetrator, or MOP as they were talking. And you can basically see to the white building on the right. If you go to the left of that shot, you can see, there we go, you can see 3 craters in the top bit of the shot, and then that's the grouping just below that was on the left-hand slide. Now, you're not seeing massive craters. The GBU-57 has a 13,600 kilometer kilogram head on it. It's 30,000 pounds. That's a huge bomb, but it doesn't explode on the surface. It goes deep into the ground, the terrain, about 200 feet. So most of the explosions would have occurred under that. As I said, mostly on Fordo, and then you have Isfahan that was attacked by sea-based US warships carrying what's called the TLAM, the Tomahawk land attack missile that travels subsonic, but it can go really low, so it's really hard to detect by radar.
Mikey, I was in Washington the night that President Trump came out with some of his top team to announce that the US had targeted those sites in Iran. And in that short address that he delivered to the nation, he claimed that those sites had been obliterated. He said that Iran's nuclear capabilities had effectively been taken out for a long time. Since then, we've heard different views on that and the length of which they have been decimated for. What do we know at the moment now?
Well, let's just go back to, I watched on set Trump's press conference with the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane. Trump mentioned the word obliterated. That's not a term we use in military parlance. It's way more nuanced than that. It's about destroying, degrading, deterring. But when the Joint Chiefs came out, his assessment was way more nuanced, but didn't quite align to obliterated. Then came that intelligence leak. And the headlines from that leak were that the centrifuges were mainly intact, over 2,000 of them in Fordo. They're used to enrich uranium. 60% was what the IAEA said back in May. 90% is the key metric. But also there was that 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium-235 that the IAEA came out with in May to report. And the Intel leak effectively said that that had been moved. So the assessment of Iran's program had been, according to the intelligence leak, put back by a matter of months. But the White House responding, the White House Spock saying that the top secret assessments were, quote, flat out wrong. However, we then saw Rafael Grossi, who's the head of the IAEA, the International Atomic Agency, and he has since said that the US strikes on the 3 facilities we've just seen had caused severe but not total, quote unquote, not total damage. So contradicting Trump's obliterated comment and also saying that Iran could start enriching again in roughly months.